Also, could you sign this? She said, pulling out a divorce oath. She had already signed her part. Then, with a high-pitched laugh, she taunted. I'm divorcing a loser, a bottom dweller. Expected demand for alimony. Fine by me. You have an inheritance coming from your father. Let's start the inheritance process. I was shocked. I never imagined my modest father had such wealth. Really? How much are we talking about? I asked out of curiosity. The response was an astounding amount. About $20 million in assets. My name is Tyler. A 42-year-old ordinary office worker. I married 5 years ago, around the time I was promoted to department head. It was an office romance, and our department celebrated our big wedding, funded by my savings. Her radiant beauty and smile from that day are still etched in my heart. My beautiful wife, Michelle, was always the heroine at work. A bit clumsy and not the best at her job, but her ever-smiling, hard-working nature was charming. I never thought I could win over such a popular lady, just admiring her from afar. But working together on a project brought us closer, and I often had to cover for her scatterbrained moments. That led to my confession, and she bashfully nodded in agreement. We dated for a few years before I proposed when I got promoted. Really, I'm so happy. I spent a fortune, including my bonus, on a large Alexandrite engagement ring to show my sincerity. She was touched and promised to never take it off. I was head over heels for her and promised a comfortable life after our marriage. Originally, she wanted to be a stay-at-home wife and said, "Then, we need to buy a beautiful house." Her radiant smile was enough to make me feel content. We searched for properties and finally bought a luxurious condo, even going on an overseas honeymoon she desired. Though my savings were almost depleted, my steady job paid enough for a comfortable life. I planned to save again for our future children. A peaceful, happy home. Coming home to a wife waiting for me, and someday kids joining us, living happily as a family, has been my long-time dream. Maybe it's because I lost my parents when I was young. Back then, I was completely caught up in the excitement. Having a beautiful wife, a home to live in with my family, and dreaming of the future ahead. I never imagined things would turn out like this. A happy family life. A dream shattered in just a few years after marriage. Michelle was a beautiful and glamorous woman. She looked great in fancy clothes, and it was fun to walk beside her. But that feeling lasted only until our early days as lovers and newlyweds. At first, she'd happily accept even a small accessory with a bright smile and words of thanks, but 5 years into our marriage, she had completely changed. Back in our newlywed days, she would greet me with a smile as soon as I got home. Now, the house is locked, dark, and silent when I return. Sighing, I turn on the lights to reveal a messy living room, further irritating me. Reluctantly tidying up, changing from my suit to casual clothes, I head to the kitchen. The unused kitchen is clean, with no dinner prepared. Opening the fridge, I find it stuffed with beer and little else to eat. I end up making instant noodles, turning on a kettle. I don't drink alcohol, so the beer in the fridge is Michelle's. I used to find her clumsy cooking attempts endearing. But I realized she began to dislike cooking, preferring to eat out at night. Working myself, I had no time to cook, and thinking it was a burden for her too, I let go of the idea of home-cooked meals. However, Michelle started disliking eating at family diners or casual restaurants, always pushing for expensive places. When I said we couldn't afford fancy restaurants every night, she looked at me scornfully, asking, "What? You can't even provide that much?" If she didn't like cooking, store-bought meals would have been fine. Or we could afford to dine at casual places every night. But she always wanted expensive restaurants, the kind where people visit for special occasions, and I honestly couldn't afford that every night. Is this what being called unmanly means? I thought I was doing well enough to enjoy a bit of luxury. But her demands and spending increased yearly after we married. She's probably out having fun somewhere even today. I give up thinking about it and head to bed, tired. She returns just before I leave for work in the morning. Her late nights have become common. She seemed to leave the house in quite flashy attire. Dressed up, she comes home just as I'm about to leave, brushing past me without a glance, saying, "Move, you're in the way." I leave the room without a word, just a sigh. I'm off. There's no response. During these days, I receive an unfamiliar bill. It's a charge of several $1,000s on a credit card I don't remember having. Michelle must have gotten it in my name without my knowledge. I call the credit card company, frustrated. Explaining its unauthorized use doesn't reduce the bill since we're married, so I can only stop the card. Looking at the usage details, there are large payments to the same place. Feeling scared, I hire a lawyer and investigator to look into Michelle's activities. Turns out, she's been spending nights at a male strip club, showering her favorite man with gifts. The shock that my hard-earned money, meant for her, is going to another man. I can't overlook this, so I take leave to wait for Michelle's return. I need to face this reality I've been avoiding. When she finally wakes up past noon and comes out of the bedroom, she frowns upon seeing me. "Why are you here? It's normal for me to be in my own house." She laughs condescendingly, saying, "Oh, this condo is in my name now, didn't I tell you?" In her cackling laughter, there was none of the beauty she had at the beginning of our marriage. Instead, there was just a venomous woman standing there. "I really want to talk things through. Can you sit down, please?" Now, of all times. Well, I'll listen, at least. Reluctantly, Michelle sat down in the chair in front of me, responding to my request. "You made some credit cards in my name without asking. How much did you spend?" "I don't remember. I threw them away when they stopped working." Michelle spoke as if she was just discarding room trash. "The visits to the male strip club. Oh, you finally noticed. It started when I was still working at the company." What do you mean by that?" Demanding an explanation, Michelle looked at me as if she found the situation ridiculously funny. "That's right, Jason. Oh, you know, he became a stripper, and I was so mad about it that I started dating you." I was speechless at her words. "I thought you were boring, but you were good with money, so I figured that was okay." Michelle nonchalantly said this, then dreamily started talking about another man. "But you see, Jason came back to me. He's aiming for the top in the stripper world, making incredible money." She continued talking about this unknown man like a lovesick girl, leaving me wondering how to react. So, I thought I'd help him reach the top. That needs money, right? I had no choice. "Don't tell me you sold this condo too." "Of course not. I'm planning to live here with Jason soon." I was completely lost at Michelle's words. Seeing my confusion, she said dismissively, "So, you should leave, okay?" What are you talking about?" "That's what I mean. This condo is in my name now, and I want to live with Jason soon. You're off today, right? Pack your things and leave." After saying this, she went back to the bedroom, leaving me stunned and confused. I couldn't think straight, so I impulsively started packing and left the house. It was pouring with rain, but I didn't care. Wandering aimlessly, drinking alcohol I couldn't handle, I eventually passed out, waking up to a white ceiling. A nurse rushed over when she noticed I was awake, checking my pulse. "Where am I? Don't you remember? You collapsed in the rain from acute alcohol poisoning and were brought here." "I'm terribly sorry. It seemed I had drunk myself into oblivion, collapsed on the street, and ended up with pneumonia from the rain." You've been asleep for 3 days. 3 days. Yes, your workplace has called several times. It seems I had been asleep for quite a while. The mental strain must have been significant. Oh, it looks like you have visitors. Seeing a shadow at the door, the nurse excused herself. Entering were Michelle and an unfamiliar man. Presumably the stripper with blonde hair and flashy suits she mentioned. So, you're alive. Thought I might get the insurance money. Her words sent chills down my spine. How much insurance had she put on me? Oh, I threw away all your stuff that was still in the room. I see. I didn't have many personal belongings in my room due to my simple lifestyle and busy job. What I had taken with me was enough. And this, please sign it. With those words, she produced a divorce oath. Michelle had already signed her part. Then, with a high-pitched, mocking laugh, she said, I'm divorcing a useless loser. Expect an alimony demand. Fine by me. Feeling too defeated to argue back, I honestly filled out and signed the divorce oath, then handed it back to her. She happily took the documents and left with her lover. At that point, I didn't care what happened anymore. Feeling overwhelmed, I lay down on the bed and fell asleep. In the following days, 2 unexpected visitors came to see me. The first was a police officer, asking if I remembered being pushed or involved in an accident, but I couldn't recall anything. The officer looked puzzled, leaving me wondering what it was all about. The second visitor was a well-dressed, middle-aged man. I didn't recognize him, but he seemed eager to know about my past. However, I didn't have much to tell. I lost my parents in a family accident when I was young. Apparently, I had no relatives, so I grew up in a foster home. Many foster homes back then were terrible places, and I was shuffled between several, leaving me with few good memories. I left the foster system upon graduating high school, took a gap year to save money, and then went to college. As I narrated my past, the man became tearful. Excuse me, but who are you? I apologize for not introducing myself sooner. I am Kyle Harrison. I'm your father's brother, your uncle. Really? I had never heard of any family relatives. I thought I had none since no one came to claim me. Your parents eloped and got married, injuring my father, your grandfather. They were estranged, and my father was removed from the family registry. However, when my grandfather's anger subsided and he received a letter and photo of his grandchild, he began searching for my parents. But by then, they had already passed away. The news deeply shocked my grandfather. He started looking for me, using private investigators. My parents had been buried without any relatives, and nobody knew where I had been sent. You used a private investigator, right? They're under our control. I had them check, thinking it couldn't be, but... So, you really are my uncle? Yes, I am. You've had a rough time. Don't worry, we'll support you from now on. His kind words made me want to cry. Perhaps it was because I had been alone for so long, unable to lean on anyone during tough times. Being told that it was okay to feel at ease like this was a first-time experience for me. I told my uncle everything that had happened. My marriage to Michelle, her betrayal, and everything leading up to now. I was completely treated like a cash cow, and even the condo I worked hard to buy was taken over. Before I knew it, I was buried in debt. My uncle patted my head, saying I had done well. His touch felt warm, and I couldn't help crying. I'll handle your divorce, but she chose a bad time, even though it's her own doing. What do you mean? You have an inheritance coming from your father. Let's start the inheritance process. I was surprised. I never imagined my modestly living father had such an estate. Really? How much are we talking about? The amount he mentioned in response to my curious question was astonishing. Yeah, The assets are roughly about $20 million, I guess. A week had passed. I had returned to work at the company. The employees in my department congratulated me on my discharge from the hospital, expressing their relief that I was safe. Then, when I reported my divorce along with my hospital discharge, my colleagues looked at me with indescribable expressions. Their somewhat pitying looks made me realize they knew about her true nature. No, more precisely, after our marriage, rumors about her had apparently been circulating. Everyone had been considerate enough not to mention it to me, but back then, Michelle was apparently flirting with other male employees as well. In fact, many who learned of her betrayal after marrying me speculated that she chose me for the most expensive engagement ring. However, seeing me happy and seemingly doing well in the early days of marriage, they thought it was just rumors. But the women in the office were quite harsh, convinced that she would definitely use me for money. They knew about Michelle's extravagant spending and her complaints about her boyfriend becoming a stripper. At the time, I was too caught up in the excitement of marriage, and it seemed no one wanted to say anything to someone about to get married. However, now, there seemed to be a sense of guilt towards me for having gone through such a messy divorce. It was just my naivety. Nobody else is to blame. Besides, I got to meet relatives I thought I didn't have. When I said that and smiled, the atmosphere in the office brightened up a bit, and I felt a renewed sense of joy in being able to work here again. After being kicked out of my home, I was living in an apartment owned by the Harrison family. It's a really nice place, and though I offered to pay rent, I was told this was originally part of the assets your father was to inherit. Don't worry about it, but surely, this luxury apartment isn't part of my inheritance, right? Considering the estimate at $20 million I was told about, I was just focusing on returning to a peaceful life amidst these surreal events. That's when my phone rang with a loud noise. It was Michelle calling. What more could she possibly want from me? Concealing assets from your wife, aren't you the worst? And why do I have to pay alimony? Her shrill voice blasted through the phone. Confused, I asked, what are you talking about? This divorce. Why don't you just pay me the alimony? What's this about a lawsuit? My lawyer had advised a civil proceeding would be best, but with my hospitalization and meeting my relatives, I had completely forgotten. I had thought the divorce was over when she filed the papers. And what's this about having relatives? You said you had none. The Harrison conglomerate chairman's grandson. I had no idea. This divorce is void. Michelle ranted, making no sense to me, so I silently hung up and blocked her number. I had consulted with my uncle, and we decided to settle things with Michelle over the weekend. The reserved restaurant had private rooms, and when I arrived, Michelle and her lover were already seated, glaring at me. Don't worry, everything has been taken care of. My uncle reassured me, patting my shoulder. Encouraged by my uncle, we sat across from them to start the discussion. But what was there to discuss? We were already divorced, and I had given up the condo. So, I did as you wanted. Divorced and let go of the condo. What more do you want? Everything. Why were you living such a lowly life, being from the Harrison family? You were hiding money from me. What are you talking about? I met my uncle only after we divorced. However, Michelle seemed not to listen, ranting, what about the alimony? Why don't you pay it? Why am I the one paying in the civil lawsuit? Glancing to the side, I saw my uncle smiling subtly. It seems that the family has been actively handling various matters. And about the credit card, why do I have to pay when it's in your name? No, you made it without permission and used it yourself. But it's in your name, you should pay. My uncle spoke calmly to the agitated Michelle. Regarding that, it wasn't Tyler who made it. It's a card created through illegal actions, even though you were married, right? What? It's joint property, so it should be fine. In that case, you also have a responsibility to pay. My uncle's calm voice was overlaid by a firm tone. You're rich, so it should be fine, right? She's saying she'll divorce you. so just pay up and let's end this," the man said with a smug, unpleasant laugh. Frankly, it wasn't something a cheating partner should be saying. "So, let's skip the hassle of a trial and just settle this with money. It's a bother for you guys too, right?" His one-sided demand was giving me a headache. But my uncle's calm response completely changed the man's attitude. "Well then, let's pursue criminal charges for credit card forgery and marriage fraud." What are you talking about? It's just that this guy is a fool and Michelle got tired of him. But still, under law, there's no obligation to pay alimony to a cheating partner. After saying that, my uncle continued in a slightly lower voice. "Well, we can pay a certain amount for the divorce settlement, but insurance fraud, that we cannot overlook." What do you mean? Tyler, did you know that the life insurance policy on you was over $2 million? Of course, I didn't know. When I involuntarily looked at Michelle, she averted her eyes, trying to escape my gaze. "Then, we'll back down from the civil lawsuit. We'll pay an appropriate amount." As my uncle said this and stood up, he motioned for me to follow. As I stood up and headed towards the exit, my uncle left them with cold words. "Seems like a lot can be uncovered if we dig deeper, right? We'll be pursuing criminal charges, so be prepared." He took me out of the restaurant. What followed happened quickly. My uncle had prepared everything, and I just had to file a lawsuit as the plaintiff, which surprisingly proceeded smoothly. We sued Michelle and her lover, Jason, for attempted insurance fraud among other crimes. The fact that I was completely unaware of the insurance was terrifying. On the day I was kicked out in the heavy rain, it seems Jason had been following me. I don't remember, but he apparently pushed me down some back alley stairs, and after making sure I was unconscious, he left. The doctors said I might not have survived if I was found any later. The prompt emergency call was thanks to a private investigator hired by the Harrison family, who had been watching me from the time they started investigating. The documents I requested from the private investigator included clear evidence of Michelle's infidelity and Jason's background check. The Harrison family's investigation revealed that Michelle had conspired with a legal clerk to take over the condo and was planning insurance fraud. It was said she'd likely get a prison sentence for these charges. So, my years-long relationship and marriage ended in a terrible way. A large house with an impressive gate. In one of its rooms, I was able to meet my grandfather, who was lying in bed. Sean Harrison, a famous investor, was my grandfather, something I could hardly believe. He smiled at me tenderly and nostalgically. "I'm sorry for my appearance. Come closer, let me see your face," he asked, and I sat down on a chair beside his bed. I owe your parents an apology. If I had allowed their marriage, they might not have died so soon." His voice, full of regret and sadness, showed me that my father was truly loved. "Yes, but my parents seemed happy, and I'm really happy to meet my grandfather." Is that so? Is that so?" Grandfather nodded several times, holding back tears, and firmly grasped my hand. "We made it in time. Thank you for being alive." His words told me he had been mourning my parents' accident, and tears started to fall from my eyes. "Yes, I'm grateful to my parents for giving me life, and to you and my uncle." As I said this, my grandfather and my uncle, standing by the bed, looked at me. "Thank you for finding me." I had rushed into marriage, seeking a family. I thought I was alone in this world. Though that failed, I was fortunate to find my true family. There couldn't be a happier ending. Now, I live happily with my family.